And so just settling in into that seat where your spine can be all fluid. And so there's this family that lives on the beach. And they have a little daughter who just loves spending time by the ocean. Playing in the tide pools. And finding those creatures within. Those little microcosms of worlds that happen when the tide goes out. Let's give ourselves just 50 more seconds here. Just finding our way into this version of stillness, of vertical ease. When it feels appropriate for you, let's allow the eyes to softly open if they're closed. We'll tuck the chin down to the sternum. As the chin tucks, really pay attention to how the cervical spine is responding to that flexion, where the mobility maybe is restricted, where the mobility is coming from. And then we'll inhale the head back up to neutral. And think about shifting the entirety of the skull back so that we get this really vertical cervical spine. And then as you start, we're going to go into a second bout of flexion. Really think about the entirety of the spine articulating. So from the base of the cervical spine, we're tucking the chin. And then allowing for more and more round as your head continues to go forward. And then imagine that you're broadening out the jaw, like softening the musculature so that the structure itself could get wider if that was possible. And retract those humeral heads. Think about a big expansiveness across the anterior of the shoulder girdle. And stay soft in the base of the throat. And then just start to tilt your head, not rock your head, but tilt your head. So the top of the head is the movement point. And the chin is really like the fulcrum that we're moving from. Trying to capture some of this lateral supportive tissue along the cervical spine. The more you keep that shoulder engagement, the more access you'll have to that tissue. Maybe one more time in each direction. And then we'll eventually come back to neutral. When it feels appropriate, let's turn our gaze over towards the left. And then back over towards the right. And then we'll just come back to neutral and just pause here for a moment. Maybe you let the eyes close once again. Try once again to find this vertical ease, this capacity for complete stillness. Soften across the entirety of the shoulder girdle. Soften in the jaws, the upper and lower jaw musculature. And then let's let the eyes open if they're closed. Take your arms and extend them straight out in front of you, but think about that shoulder integration. So we're staying engaged at the humeral head, really like you're protecting the shoulder structure itself. And then with your left hand, grab your right elbow, right hand, grab your left elbow. And we're just going to take those arms up to wherever feels comfortable. So if overhead feels comfortable, great. If in front of the forehead feels better for you, that's also ideal. Anything that feels really comfortable. And then from wherever we are, we're just going to tilt the elbows over towards the right. So either up and overhead or in front of the forehead. And then let your head come down and rest on that right bicep. And think about the entirety of the left side of the body getting long. Then we'll come back to neutral. Head as well. We'll do the same thing to the second side. Once you get that full articulation, then let your head kind of work into this space. Rest on the bicep. Just adds the cervical spine articulation. And we'll come back to neutral. And relax. Let's extend the arms out in front of us once again. Make sure you're engaged in the shoulders. So really think about that retraction and engagement. Turn the palms down, splay the fingers out wide. Try to stay relaxed in the anterior throat musculature. Turn the palms up. Palms down. Extend the arms overhead. Without pulling out of the shoulder structure. So we're still engaged, but we're reaching, extending overhead. And then turn the palms in as far behind you as is accessible. And then relax the hands to heart center. And try to feel how all that stabilization musculature in the shoulders can relax here. And let's find our way to a traditional staff seat. Legs extended out in front of us. Grab your pillow or bolster. And let's go underneath the legs here. So if you're using a pillow and it doesn't have a ton of density, feel free to add on top the blanket. We're looking to create some density underneath the leg so that we have an encouraged and supported knee bend. And then imagine that we're trying to shorten the system even more. So bringing the torso as close to the legs as is comfortable. Comfort, but shortening the system. And then think about the angle of your seat. So can you wiggle the glutes back just a little bit more so that we can neutralize out that spine a little bit more? And then grasp onto the legs, onto the feet, onto something that feels both accessible and allows you a little bit of engagement. And we're just going to hold that engagement for a moment. So if we're grabbing the legs or the calves, we just have the hands engaged just enough so that we can feel the posterior chain musculature. You're on the toe mounds, Same thing. You don't have to use the hand engagement as much because you can interlace those finger mounts and toe mounts, but we're just looking to find a little pull. You can relax the chin if that feels best for you. Sometimes when you add that little bit of flexion in the cervical spine, you'll really activate that posterior chain musculature. Really allow the utilization of the exhale breath to increase your capacity to relax into this shape. Think about the angle of our tailbone kind of going into a flat back. You can roll into the flexion as you continue to relax, but starting out with kind of this neutral angle and really trying to feel how you can expand the posterior chain. Stretch is the word that probably best fits, but I hate to use the word stretch while we're working through yoga. So let's think about how we can really elongate that musculature chain. We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. Eventually, big, full last inhale. Deep, full, releasing exhale. Think about completely letting go into this space. Every last bit of available room. And then we'll walk our spine back up to vertical. We're going to stay in this knee propped space. Take your right hand over to the lateral edge of your left thigh, calf, ankle, outer edge of the foot. We don't want to be tilted forward. So wherever you can reach forward without adding tilt is perfect. And then we're just going to rotate towards that left shoulder. As you're working your way into the rotation, we have a couple of advantageous aspects, right? We've already done that lateral chain expansion we started practice with. And then we also have the slack in the system from both knees being bent, something which is pretty atypical in these twists. Usually we're using one leg to stabilize. Here we're able to use the sacrum as our stabilization point. It should allow for the capacity for more rotation. Last breath here. As you exhale, see if you can find any more room to sink into. And then we'll come back to neutral. And try to find a balanced spinal position before we take our left hand over to the lateral edge of the right side. And we use that left hand as kind of an anchor. And then we rotate towards the right shoulder. Really thinking about how we can utilize all of the space. If you think about the structure itself, the spinal column has, its own set delineation point of rotation, right? There's a spot where it can no longer rotate. But oftentimes the musculature is so tacked down, so restrictive, that we can never get to that full, deep rotation, fullest, deepest possible rotation of the spinal column. So hopefully we're getting close here. And then we'll take one last breath. With the exhale, see if you can sink into any additional depth. And let's relax back to neutral and go back into your forward fold. Breathe into that forward fold space. Give yourself just 60 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, one last deep, full inhale, relaxing into the complete depth of your exhale. And when it feels appropriate, we'll walk ourselves back up into seat. Now, if your legs are supported, if they really feel like they're being held and elevated, we're going to keep the prop underneath us. If not, we'll remove the prop and just go to a bent knee position. We're going to take our blanket towel. And so if you're using your blanket towel to feel supported, then we'll go to a bent knee position. And we're going to take that from shelf fold, which I can get into, and just roll that into a nice solid log structure going across the mat. So against the spinal column. We are looking for the middle of the thoracic spine here. So as you lower yourself down, we want this blanket prop to really give ourselves an articulation of extension in the middle of the spine. The legs, again, either supported by props or just bent so that we have a lot of slack in the system. Again, we're trying to take the musculature restriction out and let the bone structure, the scaffolding, get into its fully articulated space, this time in an extension. Let your body relax here. If the blanket is too much, you can either pull that out and fold it so that we have a little bit less thickness, or you can pull that out and just allow your spine to relax into neutrality. That will really depend on how the musculature is responding to the shape. We're just finding our way into ease here. Make sure that your body is responding positively. If you're feeling cramping, if you're feeling muscles just getting further and further tacked down, adjust your prop so that you are receiving benefit here. And so aside from us exploring the tide pools and the critters that live on the rocky cliffs, one of this little girl's favorite activities when the tide goes out is building sandcastles. And she's incredibly gifted. Her sandcastles are not simple constructions, they're truly works of art. And yet one of the realities of sandcastle building is that no matter how intricate, how beautiful they may be made, they are remarkably temporary. When the tide comes in, and castles are washed away completely. You think about the viscosity of sand. The trick, the joke, the cosmic gag is that they really can only be built when the sand gets wet enough. And the sand only gets wet enough where the tide comes in. And so for years, she's built these works of art on the beach, only to wash them wash away. We'll give ourselves 60 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate for you, using the knee bends to just lift yourself high enough to slide that blanket prop out from underneath you, and letting your spine settle back into this neutrality. We're going to kind of play with the posterior chain. We took out the slack in the upper back there, forced the structure, the spinal column, to be into an extension articulation. And now we're going to engage our ball. And we're going to work with what we've kind of pulled from. So the area just above the ilium, that like flat structure that makes up the pelvic bowl, or that curved structure, but the top is roughly flat. And we're going to look just above that into that QL quadratus labora musculature. Now, if you have your legs elevated and lifted, your back likely has a little bit of lightness to it. So if you want more pressure, you can take the prop out from underneath the legs. If you want less pressure, you can build more prop up underneath the legs. Essentially, we're looking to catch. So we pulled these big, long musculature straps, these QL musculatures, and we pulled them from the top, which means that the anchor around the ilium here got lengthened out, and we want to look to activate, release that musculature with the ball. So just above the ilium, and we'll just settle in. Now, you can find impact by just shifting the hips left or right. It's likely a very minimal amount of movement that you'll need to give yourself until you find the optimal spot. Once you find that optimal spot of engagement, really try to relax into the ball. Try to find more ease in that musculature with each breath. So that the ball can continue to work deeper and deeper into the layers of tissue, making more and more impact. One morning, as the tide went out, this young girl rushed down to the beach because she had been dreaming all night of this sandcastle. She rushed down and started building. And just a few feet away from her, there was this old man sitting in a lotus position, dhoti pants, perfect stillness, eyes closed, facing the ocean. She didn't pay much attention to him. And neither did the passerbys who kind of all stopped and admired the beauty of this sandcastle that this little girl was constructing. And as her idea started to form more and more people started to gather around and watch this creation. People started to comment on what a shame it is this castle would be washed away when the tide comes in. This little girl overheard the comments, and she stopped and she looked up. And there was some obvious sadness within her as she acknowledged that it's true. The ocean always takes away her creations. And with that, unobserved by anyone around, this old man sitting in lotus position had a little smile creep across his face. No one noticed it happen. And more people began to gather and watch the creation of this beautiful sandcastle. We'll give ourselves 60 more seconds here. Remember, you really want to find ways where your exhale breath can allow the ball to become more and more impactful. When it feels appropriate, we'll lift our seat. Take our ball over to the second side and search for that spot just above the ilium as you release the weight of your body down, and then just think about those tweaks and adjustments so that you find the maximum impact. And then let your body relax deeply into that impact. The day progressed. The details, the intricacies of this Sandcastle continued to grow, and so did the audience watching its construction. At the same time, the tide began and then continued to inch closer. And closer. And the sun started to fade. Until eventually first wave pressed up against the base of the Sandcastle. As the sun was setting, most of the audience that had gathered had left. But to those that remained, and to the little girl, there was quite a surprise. Or the ocean water reached out and grabbed against the Sandcastle. There was no give. It stood stoic. And as the next round of waves came, the stoicism remained. The few people that stood around gasped in amazement. The little girl started to kind of jump and dance around with glee. And that old man, unnoticed as he was, just a few feet away, sitting in lotus, had that little smile return to his face. For ourselves 60 more seconds here. Remember to find those little tweaks and adjustments so that we can finish with the most impactful space for the ball to be. When it's appropriate, take that ball out from underneath us. Put that to the side and release your tailbone back down. Try to feel the space around the sacrum, around the ilium. And then let's expand on that. Bottoms of the feet come together, knees fall out wide. This is a very interesting way to have opened up this medial line, because we haven't touched the medial line at all. And yet we should find room to expand here from the removal of the restriction around the posterior chain. Remember that if this external rotation of the hips feels like it's too much on the abductor musculature, you can take those hands into fists and place them underneath the thighs, as long as the arm geometry works that way. If not, you do have that blanket prop, ball prop, or pillow prop that could be used on lateral edges or over the ankles and tucked underneath. Think really deeply about how your breath can relax you here and how your sacrum can be more and more at ease within the space you've created for it. We'll give ourselves 60 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back together and then heel toe the feet out to the width of the mat and let the knees fall in towards one another. And here we just want connection. This is the final reset of the body. And so what we really want is the sacrum to be completely at ease. If you're not feeling like the knees are bracing against one another, use the blanket, use your pillow. You could even use the ball. We want braced connection here so that all of the hip musculature can deactivate and the body can completely be at ease. The tide continued to creep in. The waves continued to splash up against this sandcastle with more and more vengeance. to the absolute joy of this little girl. The sandcastle stood strong. Night fell and she eventually had to go home. Once she jumped out of bed in the morning and ran straight down to the beach. And there it was, completely untouched by the tide, by the ocean's relentless desire to return. And people came back. And they started to gather around this sandcastle and they started to talk and wonder how it was still there. People had theories that she must have got up and made it again in the middle of the night. Or that somehow the tide didn't make it that far last night. And word started to spread, and more people came to see this immaculate sandcastle, the sandcastle that lived. And as more people gathered, more people saw the commotion, and more people gathered, until it became the talk of the town. When it feels appropriate for you, we'll bring our knees back out to the width of our ankles and then walk our ankles and our knees back in line to neutral. And as you make your way into neutral, ask yourself if there's any movement, adjustment, tweaks that your body could need or utilize before Shavasana. And if there is, let's offer those to our body now. If you have everything that you need, if you're ready for some stillness, let's offer that stillness to our body. Just finding our way into a version of Shavasana that supports us. And so with that gathering around, the little girl started with this incredibly exciting moment and then got pushed further and further away from her creation. As she was crowded out by the crowd of people that had come to observe what she had built. As the little girl was pushed further and further away, her thoughts began to change. She started to wish that the sandcastle would have gone away in the night, so she could be building a new one. Start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes, into our wrists and our ankles, building a new one instead of being pushed further and further away from her creation, into our elbows, our knees, shoulders and hips, neck, jaw, eyes. Eventually, the entirety of our body moves. And with that movement, we'll transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. In this seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. She started to realize that the joy in sandcastles is not in observing them in their perfected glory, but in building them. And with that, unnoticed by the crowd that had gathered around, this old man seated in lotus position, his eyes closed, had a little smile creep across his face once again. And as he did, the entirety of the sandcastle fell into a sand pile. And very quickly, the crowd dispersed. With your next inhale, let's bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that the joy may not be found in the perfection that you're seeking, but in the seeking that you're doing, and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. I think we'll do class tomorrow night as typical. So I'll be back tomorrow if you want to move. If not, I'll see you next week. I hope you had a beautiful holiday. I hope you're having a beautiful holiday. I love the heck out of you, and I'll see you soon. Mwah.